So I think you know that heart problems are very common in our society now, and cardiovascular disease of all different types and all. But one of the things that a lot of friends that I have suffer with is what's called atrial fibrillation. It's called AFib for short. And it's when a person's heart races up and speeds up and then slows down for sometimes no apparent reason. But for a lot of these people, there is a reason. And the reason is that their life's experiences are so overwhelming that it impacts every single aspect of who and what they are, every part of their muscles and organs, and of course the heart being one of, and the primary muscle that is required. It is impacted by the experience around us. Now, we know that this from science. 2,000 years have passed from the time when Jesus says this statement about do not let your hearts be troubled. 2,000 years have passed, and there is science now to validate what it is that Jesus talked about. But let's keep it in context. Jesus is talking to his disciples, okay? This is post-resurrection. This is after all of this has been said and done. This is John's gospel. So John's gospel is the latest of the gospels. It's about 95 years after the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. A lot of theology has been developed during this time. A lot of thought process, a lot of followers, a lot of questions have been asked. And it is intriguing to me that John is the one who recalls that Jesus says to his disciples, do not let your hearts be troubled, which implies what? That they were. We think somehow, and we put these disciples on pedestals, and we believe that somehow, because they were in the presence of Jesus, they did not experience fear. That they believed in this Jesus, that they did not experience anxiety. And yet, here is Jesus declaring to them completely, do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let your hearts go into AFib. Because I am with you, and I am going to prepare a place for you. Now, these disciples, much like ourselves, are challenged. They're challenged to see how much can they be faithful and how much can they love. And both of those things in their day, and sometimes in certain situations, circumstances, and places on the face of this planet, trying to be faithful to Jesus and to be outstanding in exemplifying his love can get you an enormous amount of trouble. And yet, here is Jesus telling his own disciples, do not let your hearts be troubled. But it's so powerful to me because it means that they were. It means that they were upset, that they were uncomfortable, that they knew that the Jews and the Romans were looking for them to put them to death. They knew that this Jesus was not really going to be well accepted. They knew that by living a life of love in the face of everything else that they were encountering, everything that society put forth to them, to be that different, to be loving in spite of hatred, to be loving in the face of hatred, to be peace-filled in the face of a peaceless society, was going to alienate and isolate them, and ultimately they were going to end up suffering more than what they already were. What they were worried about, Jesus is still with them. What they're worried about is when he leaves and we have to do this by ourselves, what does this look like? And so the anxiety of what is about to come is what triggers the disciples to have their hearts troubled. And for most of us, our anxiety has nothing to do with current situations. It's all about projecting into the future what may or may not happen. And for those of us who are getting older, we look back over our lives and we say most of the time we have spent worrying about things ultimately have never come to pass. We've wasted all that time, all that energy, a lot more gray hairs, and in the end, it never passes. And yet, in spite of the fact that we've learned those lessons, human nature, all the way back to the time of Jesus, is simply built to be reactive and to be worried and to be concerned and to be anxious about the future. And Jesus steps forth and says, do not let your hearts be troubled. And I'm sure every single one of them is saying exactly what I said when I read this passage. Yeah, easy for you to say. You're the Son of God, of course. But for us who are mere mortals trying to get through this and trying to live our life and to seek out, right, what is really like moments or glimpses of peacefulness and calm, serenity, a sense of connectedness to family, connectedness even to ourselves, right? I'm not even talking about faith yet. I'm just talking about human experience. Is that difficult and that challenging for all of us as we move through life? And yet, in the midst of, and I find it ironic, our world right now is challenged in many different places, in many different phases, and yet the church has us reading this passage to all of its members throughout the world. Do not let your hearts be troubled. And I got to sit down, I got to tell you, I sat down, and Jesus and I had a go, and I'm going to say I won, but he's going to say he won. I'll let him have it. It's okay. The point of, listen, God, what are you talking about? Have you watched the news? Have you been looking at anything that's going on all around the world, how things are shifting and changing? What was geopolitical establishment is now shifting to such a point, and it's easy for you because you don't have to pay $5 for a gallon of gas. Jesus seems to get along pretty well all by himself without any cars. So he moves from place to place. But the fact of the matter is, you call these things out and you say to Jesus, so what are you saying to me? And it goes on and he says, listen, you believe that everything that you are, your entire totality, is based on this world and this life's experience. I have gone to a place where there is already a place prepared for you. You cannot look at this world as being the entirety of your life because there is something indeed more. Now look, you all know that we run the Spiritual Care Association, Healthcare Chaplaincy, has thousands of chaplains all over the country, all over the world, right? So we have chaplains. These chaplains encounter people who, in their most desperate moment, what is it that they are actually involved in when they encounter a patient is trying to get them to explain to the chaplain what are the values that you have set in your life. What are those things that bring you meaning and purpose? What do you believe are the answers to the existential questions about what comes next? Now, for us as Christians, we fall to this passage. A home has been prepared, a room. It says a room. I'd like a home, but it's okay. We'll argue about that later. But the fact of the matter is that Jesus has prepared a space that even where we are right now, with everything that we're going through, everything we feel, the fear, the tumultuousness, the anxiety that we're all encountering, that we all carry, it's the one universal thing that every single person I talk to talks about, how anxious their life is. And these are people who are very well established, who you would think would have no anxiety or concerns or worries at all, but yet even their lives, have anxiety, worries, and stresses. And yet, in the midst of all that, Jesus is trying to have us focus not on where we are, but the reason why our hearts should not be troubled is because Jesus is the final answer. That ultimately, when we transition from this world, and we all will, no one has survived death. But when we transition out of this world, Jesus has promised that there is a place prepared for us, which means that Jesus is with us during the journey, and ultimately at the end, he is there to embrace us and to bring us home. The hope of that moment is meant to be the energy and sustainability of how we live through this life. We cannot stay so narrow-minded with blinders on to look at just our experience. I ended up saying to a person at one point in counseling, and this definitely came from God, it didn't come from me. I said to them, the more you focus on your anxiety, your stress, and your worries, the less you can see God. And I believe that statement was inspired because I'm not that smart. But the truth of the matter is, isn't it true? The more narrow-minded we are and the more focused we are, and we tend to focus on things that bother us, and we drill it over and over in ourselves until it's dead. But the more we focus on that, the less capable we are of seeing God in the moment. And I think this message for us, in its simplicity, is enough for today. Do not let your hearts be troubled. God bless you.